today, somebody who seems to want to watch me as I do this lecture made a suggestion. In view of the fact that there's not a lecture now being posted regularly once a week, uh, some of the people who are watching them want to know when I'm going to be gone and when I'm coming back. So there's a simple solution to the problem that was suggested to me. Anybody who wants to be informed when the next lecture may take place should send me an email wanting to be on a list of people who are informed. Let me give you my special office email address. It's very easy to remember. It's 3 words, Arthur Kovac's office. It is what it says. All in small letters run together. 3 words, Arthur Kovac's office at AOL.com. And just ask to be put on a list of people to be notified when a next lecture is going to appear. And I will set up a group email function and I will let you know when that's going to happen. For now, let me announce I will be here today, and there's something I want to talk about next week too. So I'm not on very much hiatus at this moment. I will, whenever this one gets posted, a day, 2, 3 days from now, please know that a week from today, a week from next Friday, I will be recording another episode of whatever these blathers happen to be about. For today, I want to continue my homage to my client, Anna, and get into some other issues that help illuminate what I find particularly compelling about her, and something of the psychology of someone who seems to have been able to come forward with great resiliency in the face of one blow after another that would have done many people in. They would have spent their life in mental hospitals or been wretches with some kind of terrible character defects for the rest of their lives. And she continues to rise, to heal, to blossom, and to become ever more fully both wonderful and human. And I feel very privileged to be able to be her companion as she makes this journey. What are the factors that have allowed her to survive? I don't know all of them. For one thing, she has excellent natural intelligence. She started reading at an early age. She read voraciously. She wanted to read in English and taught herself English. She is quite talented and intelligent. I'm not sure that intelligence per se guarantees resiliency and guarantees the capacity for mastering problems better, but it certainly doesn't hurt. And I have frequently been impressed by how much she can learn and how easily she seems able to learn it. Another critical factor that happened to her, partly because of the strange structure of this family that she was born into, is that she was given the responsibility at an early age. She was about 8 to be the one who took care of her youngest sister. Older sister was not interested, could not be dragooned into the job. My client valued the opportunity to be on duty many hours a day when she wasn't in school, entertaining her younger sister, supervising her, teaching her things, and being with her. From my perspective, this makes sense from a certain psychological perspective. It gave her the same opportunity while she was growing up that most of us don't get until we're in adulthood and become parents. In the attempt to be for somebody we're responsible for, in her case, a sister, in most of our cases, the first child we have, to become responsible for them and to be able to be with them, sustain them, watch over them, and do for them in kind, sustaining, and worthwhile ways heals the damage in us as much as it leads them to better outcomes. So she never resented having to take care of her sister. For her, it was an opportunity. And she would think of things she could teach her younger sister. She would think of games for her to play. She did what neither her father or mother ever did. She lavished praise on her younger sister, telling her how adorable she was, how excellent she was when she mastered a new challenge. She was full of positive regard and encouragement for this young sister. It not only paid off, I think, in helping Anna to ward off some of the worst difficulties she was being challenged to live through, but it did really good things for the sister. Her sister, youngest sister, turns out to be an exceptional person. Her youngest sister is finishing law school in the Middle Eastern country that they all come from. There aren't many women who have been admitted to law school to study to be members of the bar in that country. It's typically a male profession. And not only that, she is a flaming radical. She wants to become a lawyer so she could pursue women's rights in the Arab world. And she is going to be a fighter and a wonderful person. And I hold my client partly responsible for the excellent outcome of what the life of the younger sister is becoming. The older sister is not a very admirable person at all. She's taken in with Western consumerism. She wants to have nice vacations, a good car. She wants the privilege of driving. She wants to marry a rich man who will take good care of her. She has many of the traditional values of Arab women. She wants to be very pretty. Mainly, she wants to be a good consumer. That's what she wants. And she even calls up long distance. I forgot what the platform is they use to phone each other between continents, but they do. WhatsApp, I guess they use. And the sister will say things like, I went out to dinner too much this week. I've run my credit card up. Could you send me 500 American dollars so I can pay off my credit card bill? And my client gets really upset with this kind of behavior. She has no desire to keep indulging her sister in being irresponsible financially. And there is tension between the two of them. What else has led her to have more resiliency than should be expected? I'll let that one go for a moment. I think there are other things, but they are eluding me. Oh, I made a note of this. I don't know if I made it clear that not only did father separate from mother, but he took a second wife, and the second wife had step siblings that my client was expected to relate to. And father was always busy with his other family. She was left alone with mother and with grandparents. And it was not good for her. I did not mention, I think, that mother had worked as a school librarian. And one thing, the only good thing that my client can think of about having her mother be her mother was her mother would steal books from the school library to bring home for her daughter to read. And that was the one good thing she was very appreciative of her mother doing. Her mother valued education and liked it when she was learning. That was about the only good thing they had going back and forth between the two of them. The rest of the time, she was being beaten because she wasn't a proper Muslim. She was being beaten because she had ideas that were revolutionary, and they were not the correct ideas for somebody in her position to have. And it was nothing but warfare between mother and daughter. And the best my client could do for many years before she finally got herself out and sent away to school abroad was to learn how to avoid her mother, not be home when her mother was there, not interact with her mother and shine her mother on. Maybe that was a good adaptive skill too, to have enough sense not to get into the middle of conflict when it was avoidable. I'm now drawn to the beginning of my work with her. She showed up and she looked very young. I think, how old was she? She was 19, I think, when she showed. No, she was 20 when she showed up. And she walked in. She looked like she was about 14. She had no breasts. She was very good at hiding them. She dressed in a nondescript fashion so as not to call any attention to herself. And she brought 3 stuffed animals with her that she was hugging desperately. And then she sat down in her chair and she started to tell me she was having trouble adjusting to being a student at Pepperdine University. And she was hoping that I could help her. The theme of the stuffed animals goes on and on and on. She is known in the work that she does for the lady with the animals. She has about 45 of them now that she keeps around her. And she's always touching one, holding one, having one on her lap. There was not any good bonding experience for her when she was small with any humans. And she made up for it somehow with stuffed animals. And she's always not too far from reaching and being able to grab and pull a stuffed animal to her when she's having sorrowful thoughts or feeling troubled about anything. It's as if the stuffed animal is a piece of her as an infant, and she rocks the stuffed animal while she tells me about whatever the trouble is that she's in. And she has the most interesting, all kinds. So some of them beep and tweet and do things mechanically. Some of them are just adorable. Some of them are very large, almost full size. Some of them are very, very small. And they all have names and they all have personalities. And she tells me who they are and what their personalities are. And she tells me what they're good at, what skills they have, and what they don't know anything about at all. They are very real for her. She has created what psychotics do not create. Psychotics tend to go off in an altered reality that's very painful and persecutory. She goes off into an alternative reality with her stuffed animals, and it's like Alice in Wonderland without any witches. It's a beautiful place where lovely things are happening, and she is the Wizard of Oz that can solve the animals' problems, and everything gets better when they go off together. Well, I did start trying to help her to be a better student at Pepperdine. I was impressed with the kinds of things she was telling me she was experiencing when she was in class. She would listen to conversations. She would listen to students' responses to presentations professors were making. The students seemed shallow, empty-headed consumers like her sister back in the Middle East. Spoiled, often angry with the teacher because the teacher was asking them to do things that were too hard. They wanted them changed so the exams would be easier, the assignments would be easier. If they got a bad grade, they would shamelessly ask in class, could that one be forgiven and something else be substituted? One of them said on one occasion in one of her classes, we pay you tuition. You have a responsibility to give us a degree. The students had no responsibility to learn anything or produce anything or work at anything. They were entitled to a degree because they were paying expensive tuition to go to a private university. She hated all that. I encouraged her to see what she could to speak up more in class. I joined her in saying, I don't need you to take a risk of being ostracized and hated by your classmates because you see a different reality than they do. But you have reactions to the course material that you're hearing. Some of it is great interest, some of it is intelligent comments you want to make. Your response to the flow of information that's being provided to you is quite wonderful and worthwhile. I wish you would speak up. I wish that your professors understood how well you were learning, what a vital member of the class you are, even if you're private. So we worked hard on helping her to develop a voice and to give up what had been her mantra as much as possible ever since she got out of the house, to be as invisible as possible. I said her future would depend on her ceasing to be invisible. She has much to say of value. She has much to say about how one copes with hurt and distress and mayhem. She has much to say about the theories that she is being provided in college, and she takes her graduate school education. She is a potentially very valuable person with much to offer, and she is. I said, you cannot escape. You are doomed. You are fated to take up a position of some specialness and some importance in our culture. You're going to go there whether you fight against it or not, and I would like you to stop fighting against it and surrender. In addition to trying her to be a leader as a student in the classroom, I tried to get her to turn her pain to her advantage. I said, the story of your life is not a story that ought to, as it seems to, fill you with shame and with pain. The story of your life is the glorious story of fighting against all odds and becoming something of great merit and worthwhile in spite of attempts to destroy you, smother you, suffocate you, rape you. You overcame and somehow continued. You went forward. You still are. You're much safer now than you've ever been, and you're on the threshold of being able to have people pay attention to you if you will speak up. Would you consider writing your memoirs? It's intrinsically interesting just to hear the story of your life. Other people would find it valuable for them to hear the story of your life. Could you find the courage to write your memoir? I think you would have a bestseller. I think it might even get made into a movie. It's that interesting. She said, no, I would have to hide. I would have to hide for the rest of my life. I said, no, you would not have to hide. You could stand forward and say, I have told my truth, and that is the truth that I have lived. And you could be proud of having told your truth. So this is a debate that still goes on. She comes up to the idea of writing some notes for a chapter in her memoirs, and then she doesn't go any further than writing a few notes for maybe some part of a memoir and a chapter in the book of her life. I also explained to her my belief I had about how one overcomes trauma. I said, in the people who I've kept company with and who I've read about who seem to have been successful, there are a set of stages they go through. The first stage is the horrible stage. It's the stage where the trauma is happening and it's awful and they're silent and they feel torn and they feel broken and they feel desperate and they may want to die and they feel like they must be responsible for this. They wonder about how it could ever be stopped. They feel so out of control and so helpless. That's a terrible stage. But one of the things that's going on is they are keeping secrets. It feels too shameful and too dangerous to let anybody know what they're experiencing. So stage one is a decision to break the silence and to become public about what has been happening. Who else except me knows about how your cousin would rape you regularly and about how you were raped by a stranger on the streets of the capital city of your country. He said, nobody knows. I said, well, I feel highly privileged that you trusted me enough to tell me, but we have to expand the number of people who know. Your mother doesn't know, and that was her nephew who was doing this to you. No, she doesn't know. Your father doesn't know. Nobody ever protected you. Now, the adults who were supposed to make sure you were safe didn't do that. And you're going to let them go away unaccounted? She said, if I tell my mother, she's going to tell me that I'm lying, that I made it up. And she'll probably slap my face if I tell her in person. And she may even try choking me again. I said, well, you can tell her you can write her everything you want to tell her about that, and you can send it to her. I don't think she will be able to resist the temptation of reading it. Do your sisters know? No, my sisters don't know. In some ways, I wanted to protect them. I was offering myself to our cousin so that they would leave them alone. He would leave them alone. I said, well, they owe you homage for having kept them safe while they were growing up and sacrificing your own body on the altar of their protection. I'd like you to have the courage to tell them what you did for them. They need to know too, because you tell me that man is now married and he has children. Who of us knows what he's doing to his own children if he was doing that to you? Has he been reported to the authorities? What are the laws like in your country? And she then told me her father was a social worker. And I said, your father is a social worker and he doesn't know anything about this and he hasn't done anything about this. No. So I have some movement. She has told everybody but her mother. And she's told her two sisters and told her father. Her father reacted by saying he was going to make a suicide attempt. He felt so guilty and so terrible that he abandoned his daughter to his former wife and that he had not protected her. He has a core of decency in him. But his solution is not a good one. He told her, come back to the country, give up your education, come be with me. I will watch over you. I'll take care of you now and I'll support you. And that's the last thing in the world she wants is to return to her country and be her father's companion. Her sisters listened and then started yelling and said, each one said, I can't take this. I don't want to hear anymore. I'm not ready. I'll tell you when I'm ready to hear more. So that's a work in progress, telling the sisters. But the work has started. The first step is breaking the silence. The second step is to fight back. She just absorbed what happened to her when she went through this. I want her to get in touch with the authorities in her country and to file a report about him. And I want her to call her stepsister-in-law, who's married to him, and tell her stepsister-in-law what her husband did to her while she was growing up, and tell that woman to guard the children that they've had together very, very much. And she said, oh, I can't do that. That would be cruel. I said, no, it would be not cruel. It would be taking care of the generation to come and making sure they don't have to live through what you lived through. So this debate between the two of us is still ongoing. She's not taken that step either. And the final one would be to hold him directly accountable, to have a discussion with him directly, either in writing or in some way, where she tells him how odious his behavior was, how damaged she was as a result, all the wounds that were inflicted on her, all the struggles she's had to overcome because of how he treated her, and how much hatred she carries for him. And she hopes he has a miserable life and hurts for the rest of his life. I want her to have that conversation with him. So that's a work in progress yet. She doesn't feel nearly ready to contact him. She still feels frightened. If she contacts him, he's going to still be powerful and something horrible is going to happen to her. So she is still fragile and only partway down the road toward better recovery. Even though, wonder of wonders, having been so battered and so molested, is not interfering at the moment. And are building a life that continues to unfold in better and better ways. All right, I take a breath at that point. Okay. What else did I do with her that was useful or potentially useful to her? Somewhere in the early months of our work together, it struck me she was friendless by and large. She had a relationship at that point with one of her faculty members, as I told you, who would take her out to lunch occasionally and spend some time talking to her. But there was nobody but me who knew her secrets and the depths of her struggles and the kinds of wounds she was carrying. And I wanted her to be better known and to have more people who knew her and who cared about her. She could not name anybody to whom she was really important. So I did a crazy thing, one of my crazy interventions. I said, let me take you somewhere else. You seem to value talking to me, and you're able to feel some sense of goodness because of that, and to value the interactions we have with each other. I'm a member of a consultation group. There are 7 other mental health professionals in it. And I think they would be interested in hearing the story of your life too. How about you come and I will arrange for it. You come spend 2 hours with us and you'll talk to us about your life. And we'll talk to you about things that occur to us that might be helpful for you and might be useful. So I had worked this out with the group, and sure enough, she showed up. She had, of course, 2 stuffed animals in tow. And one of our members, Lisa, said to her at some point, do you ever think about drawing? And she said, no, I drawed a little when I was small, but I don't draw much. She said, Lisa said to her, it's helpful if you're dealing with pain feelings to try and draw images of them and put them down on paper so you can look at them and make them objective. And she said, why don't you start? I'll give Dr. Kovac some charcoal and some drawing paper, and when you come to the next session, he'll give it to you. And see what you like doing if you play around with the charcoal. See if that has any meaning or helps you anyway to get deeper into yourself. That proved to be a wonderful suggestion. She started working with charcoal, and she made scribbles and squiggles, and then images of one sort or another, and symbols of one sort of thing or other. She would tell me stories about what the symbolism of the sketches was that she was making. And then she's decided to switch over. She said, I think it's grim. I'm drawing only in black with charcoal. She said, I know I go to the store, the art supply store, to replenish my charcoal supplies and my drawing pads, and there are pastels there. There are crayons that are similar to the texture of the charcoal, but I can do it in color. So then she started making pastel drawings, and now she has shifted over to oil painting, and her artwork is really quite lovely. It's worth looking at. She's now making important art, and often when she uses the art with the kids she's working with. One of her kids is telling her about something, and she said, let me draw what I'm thinking about while you're talking. And when you're finished, I'll show it to you and we'll talk about what we've drawn. So she does that. She makes a drawing of something that's occurred to her that's been triggered by the story she's hearing from the kid. And then the 2 of them look at her drawing. And sometimes she asks the kid, do you have things to draw with? Maybe you need to make a drawing in response to my drawing, and we'll talk about both of our drawings. And she is wonderful about engaging children in things that are expressive and help them to express in every way, not just in words, but in in dancing sometimes, or in motions with their hands that they make to try and signal things. I cannot tell you how creative and inventive she is in bonding with children. It's wonderful. It's absolutely impressive. And that whole unfolding of something new that she could attach to and enjoy and experience was keyed off by that stupid thing I said, come to group and we'll all listen to you and see if we can come up with anything that might be useful to you. Of course, I already mentioned that an additional person was added to her life when she allowed herself to be courted, to get involved with, to live with, and actually married a male with whom she's now learning how to be fully sexual with. That is a miracle I never thought would happen, and it is a glorious story in and of itself. Hmm. Oh, what's quite precious is it started off with his being the older one. He's about 8 or 9 years older than she is. So he was the older one, the settled one, the one who could live effectively in the culture, the one who had some friends. He even had an early marriage that he's divorced from. So he was the model of a bridge into ordinariness and the ordinary things of being a member of the culture. But it turns out he's also a strange duck in some ways. His parents were card-carrying hippies back in the hippie era, and he has some anti-structural values. He never paid income tax. He just got paid in cash and kept the money. And I think that's the biggest deviance he has. Of course, he likes reading tarot cards. That's fun for him. And he has a novel profession, not entirely novel. He's a massage therapist. He gives relief and pleasure to people by kneading them with his fingers. That's not a traditional occupation that men who want to make a lot of money go into. And he's not materialistic at all. If they can have a small apartment and a reasonably comfortable place, have at least one old car to drive, he likes traveling to see new things and beautiful places, but he's not materialistic at all. He doesn't need to wear expensive clothing. He doesn't need to take fine vacations to a five-star hotel. He lives a life, he eats simply. He likes rice. He likes simple dishes. She has learned to cook and to take pleasure from cooking. That's another thing that's come on her in the recent years she's been with him. She makes the meals now. I never thought that would happen. She's allowing her appetite to teach her what to eat and how much to eat. I never thought that would happen. So he's been a very good influence on her, but she's learned to be the grown-up one. Since they're married and they want permanent residency for her, they have to work their way through the INS hoops and the whatever the steps towards getting her eventual citizenship. And she is the lead person. She found a not terribly expensive immigration attorney, and she's the one who meets with him, and he teaches her what the two of them need to do as a couple. One thing they needed to do was to get his delinquency with his income taxes cleaned up. That was going to be a black mark because one of the things the INS will do is investigate what his sources of income are, and are they going to be a public charge, or does he really have a worthwhile income that can be depended upon? And part of that will be to look at his tax returns, which he never filed. So she also found an attorney who specializes in delinquent tax returns and took pity on her story about what she needs them for. And she has managed to get all the data together and to work out a payment plan with the IRS so that he is now clean and kosher again. Over the next 5 years, he's going to pay off all the back taxes. The payments are not too onerous. I think it's about $320 a month he's going to have to pay over 5 years, and they'll be totally square that. If he doesn't miss a payment, the IRS will love him and think he's a wonderful citizen. So that's been cleaned up, and she has been the lead person, much to my surprise. All right, I still have some time. I started by saying that I felt like crying when she told me about the little boy she was saying goodbye to. Uh, I have thoroughly enjoyed listening to her tell me about her work with him. And I never have met the kid, but in absentia, he became an important part of my life too. He is an amazing, amazing person. His IQ is probably about 200. She was, let's see, his parents are Korean. Uh, his parents are rather austere emotionally. Uh, he is now 6. She came when he was 4. And at that time, there was also a younger sibling, age 2.5, I think, a girl. And mom gave up her career. She was an investment banker, and she is very given to consumerism and living well and being successful. And father is an engineer with a typical engineer's personality. He doesn't know what a feeling is and wouldn't know a feeling if it hit him over the head. And he's very instrumental and very good at problem solving. And the parents knew the kid was different. He seemed to be engaged in, what's it called? Elective mutism. Every once in a while, he would say a word, but they would try and get him to talk, and he wasn't willing to talk. He would shake his head, no, he wasn't talking. And they tried spanking him, and he wouldn't talk. They tried bribing him. They would get him an iPad if he talked. He wouldn't talk. It was as if his personhood was tied up in not talking. And he was in preschool and he wasn't talking there either. And he moved on from preschool into elementary school, and he was diagnosed as on the spectrum somewhere. And then he became capable of getting specialized education in the public school he was going to, and to get adjunct services. So they signed up for ABA training, and the ABA trainer came and tried to get him to speak. She offered him M&Ms if he would say a word. She would form the word with her mouth and ask him to practice saying the word, and he would look at her and he would run away. And he wasn't having any of it. They were going nowhere. So the ABA therapist suggested something else, that they reward him with special desserts. That didn't work either. They give him a budget to go to the store and buy whatever toys he wanted. If he would talk, if he said 3 words and strung out a sentence, that didn't work. And at some point, for some reason, somebody suggested that he have floor time in addition to the ABA work that the ABA therapist was trying to do. So off went my client. She met him just twice before COVID hit, and then since then it has been online by video. And at first, she couldn't get him to be one-on-one alone with her. Mother was sitting in the room with her, talking on the telephone or relating to the infant child and shushing the infant child or feeding her. There was no privacy and no separate setting for just her and the little kid. And it took her a while before she could compel the mother to stay away. And the boy came to be with her. She asked him, did he understand how to make the Zoom connection work? And he nodded his head yes. He didn't say any words, but he nodded yes. And she told him, I'm having trouble today. Let me tell you about my trouble. And she took two of her toys. This is Sam. and this is Emmanuel, and they had a big fight today, and I don't know what to do with them. They're not talking to each other. And she said, I keep giving him a hug. Here, let me hug this one. And I'm sorry you had a fight. Is there anything I can do to help you get over it? She was talking to the animals in his presence as if they were children of hers, and she was trying to settle a squabble. And then she turned to him and said, I bet you it's annoying to have your sister. Your mother seems all tied up with her and doesn't pay much attention to you at all. Does she ever pay any attention to you? And he shook his head, no. And she said, well, when we're together, you get all of my attention. Is there anything you'd like to do? Do you have any toys you'd like to show me that you're particularly fond of? And he nodded yes, and he brought his iPad to her, and he showed it to her, and it was all covered with math problems: addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. And he was only 4 years old, and he was doing very complex arithmetic problems. And she said, oh, you seem to have a talent for arithmetic. Do you like doing arithmetic? This time he said the word yes. He said, well, we could do some arithmetic problems. I'll see if I can find some arithmetic games, and maybe we can play them together. I would like you to have a nice time with me, and I would like us to find things we could do together that we might enjoy. Well, he enjoyed her up the wazoo. Within 6 months, she had him talking very fluently. There was no problem talking whatsoever. And in addition, she discovered that he had insane curiosity for everything. He said, I like looking through the dictionary. When I come to a word I don't know, I look up and see what it says. He was reading fluently at age 4. I see what the word says and I try to understand what that is. But there are some words I don't know. So she started bringing the words that he was having trouble understanding to her. They were mainly scientific words about biochemicals, words about physical and physics processes. So she knows a little about science. She was trying to explain it to him. She said, I don't know if I can give you complete answers for those. Well, before I come back next time, let me do some research. Let me see if I can find the articles for you to read, or at least find some things that I can tell you about that I've discovered researching them. So he went on a big scientific bender. He started reading all kinds of things. One of the things he started reading was it's the Journal of the Atomic Physicists, I think. He started reading. And he started reading the Journal of the American Medical Association. He said, I now see how docs do research. That's really interesting. Do you think this research could be done in this way instead of the way it was done here? And he is just brilliant. And he was a problem in school. He didn't want to do the work, and he was rebelling and saying no, and he was going off and standing in a corner. And she was trying to explain to the mother, and she had a conference with the teacher. He is just bored out of his gourd. He is capable of paying attention to college level courses. And here he is in kindergarten learning what is red and what is green. He knew that years ago. He doesn't need to study in school. It gets him bored as hell. And so, wonder of wonders, something else terrific happened. He was out walking in the neighborhood, and there was an elderly man there, and the elderly man stopped to talk to him. And it turns out the elderly man was a retired physics professor. So the elderly man started to talk to him. He saw how bright the kid was. She got the elderly scientist's name and called him up and said, you have a very special kid. I'm working with him, and he is just amazing beyond words. Is there any way you would spend some time with him regularly? So he said, hell yes, I'm bored. I'd love to teach him anything he'd like to learn about. So 3 times a week, he would spend a couple hours with the kid, talking to him about physics, talking to him about the principles of hydrochemical reactions, all kinds of things. What natural selection was, Darwin's theories. He had a scientist by his side that he could interact with and bring up any of the things he was concerned about. So with my client, most of his questions were about human dilemmas. Uh, why do human beings blush? What is shyness? Why do people get shy? She would have to be the one who tried to educate him about questions like that. What she was so sad about was the parents kept asking her, what is it that we can do with him? And she kept trying to teach them, spend time with him, let him lead. He has a wonderful, inventive imagination. He's full of questions. Just let him tell you what he wants from you, what games he might want to play with you, what questions he wants you to answer, because they couldn't get through that through their thick skulls. They wanted the name of what board games would be good to play with him. They have no concept of having just a creative, spontaneous interaction with their own child, where he leads and brings up topics that are of interest to them, and they serve as consultants to him. Coming from a dictatorial Korean family, those notions are just out of their ken. And what was so sad about all this? The family was now moving to Texas. Father got a really very well-paying job in Texas, and they had purchased in a suburb of Austin a 9-bedroom house, and he was going off to live in a 9-bedroom house in Austin, Texas. But since they weren't going to be residents of the state of California anymore, even though this family is wealthy, the relationship with my client was coming to an end. He was no longer going to be working with her, and he wouldn't have the benefit of being able to go over to the scientist's house and hang out there 6 hours a week anymore either. So I am not surprised that he wanted to play hide and seek with her over and over again. At that moment, he regressed, to use psychoanalytic lingo. He was like a small child again who was being confronted with a terrible loss, and he wanted to play some game. The subject of the game was, don't get too upset about the loss, because the loss will come back and the loss will be replaced. And he wanted to play it over and over and over again. He filled up the whole hour with the two of them doing nothing but playing hide and seek. And my poor client was crying with me when she told me about her last session with him, and I was crying with her. I feel a terrible loss myself. I'm sorry I don't hear the continuing story of the unfolding of that boy's life either. I'm sorry I'm going to die before I know what he does at adulthood. He's going to do something very special in this world if he can get more of the kind of treatment my client was giving him. I hope they have enough good sense to find somebody who will give him good therapy. And now I visit my own beginnings in the field. The one time that I was scheduled and sent to spend time with children and families at the Merrill Palmer School. I've told this story on other occasions, but it deserves to be embedded here because it affected my work with my client, and beyond that, with what I could try and struggle to tell her about her work with her client. At the Merrill Palmer School, I was expected to do some couples therapy, which was just in its infancy then, and to do child therapy, which had been around for more than a decade. Anna Freud had started trying to do what she called child analysis, trying to take children and apply the kinds of psychoanalytic principles invented by her father to children. There was a stream of Adlerian therapists coming from Germany and the United States too, who were using the teachings of Albert Adler in the attempt to work with problematic children. So the child therapy was ahead of couples therapy in the United States, but it still hadn't been around for a long period of time. There weren't a large number of professionals devoted to seeing only children. Mainly, they were people in the school system. School psychologists would spend time with problematic children in sessions at the school, but they were not an independent practice dealing with the children of almost any family who may not have had any particular school problems at all. So one of the things we did was we read existential literature. We read Sartre. We read Kierkegaard. Who was I forgot who the third one was. Extensive writings. Oh, Buber we read. And we read Carl Rogers. The mentor I had doing the child therapy was engaged in his own exploration. He was trained by Carl Rogers to do effective work with adults, but he had been hired to do child therapy. So he was stretching to take the principles he had learned in client-centered psychotherapy with adults and try to convert that into working with children. And by the way, he did it very well. I didn't appreciate it at the time, though. From my perspective, he was a failure because I had been trained to be a psychoanalyst. We watched him, one of our 2 sessions with him was watching him work with a child from behind a one-way mirror. He was in the playroom and there was a one-way vision screen and with a little room where people could sit and watch what was going on in the playroom. And he never asked any questions. He never tried to lead. He simply had a lot of toys in there. He waited for the kid to come in and the kid would engage with something finally. And he would make a pleasant comment about what he was observing and what he thinks the child was trying to say with his play or with his behavior. That's all he did. He never made an interpretation about what must have gone on at home or inquired about how he was being raised by the parents. He didn't do any interviewing and he didn't make any interpretations. 2 of the critical things that I was trained must happen if effective therapy is to go forward. So I was very irritated with Clark Moustakis. And the principle he was living by was the very thing that my client, with her brilliant child, had discovered was the way to reach him and to get to his core and to his substance. It was to be interested in what was on his mind, to let him lead and to follow with appreciation and any helpfulness she could give him to expand what it was he wanted to focus on and to be interested in, but never be the one who determined how they were going to spend the time together. That was always up to him. And poor Clark Moustakis was trying to teach us that. I couldn't even hear the message. I couldn't learn from him at all. I had, like everything else, I had to control what went on in the session. I had an agenda. I had to help the child to get to that agenda. So I was the expert and the child was the buffoon. And I was supposed to help the child to cease being such a buffoon or such a damaged object. I'm not very proud of what I was, but maybe I can let it go because I am not that anymore. As a matter of fact, the concept of trying to see where the client, the adult client or the couple is sitting, what are they sitting in right now and struggling with? How can I address that? Because it's where they are, what they're in the middle of, what's on their minds, and what needs attention. How can I help them with that and be responsive to what they're leading me to pay attention to, not what's on my agenda for what I think they should be doing. Yeah. I think I've covered what I wanted to cover today. I'm done a little bit early. So let me repeat my request. If you want advance notice, since I only are going to be lecturing intermittently, if you want advance notice of when a new posting is going to go up, please send me an email to go on a list to be notified. And that email should go to my email address, Arthur Kovac's office at AOL.com. And until then, I will be putting up something next Friday, and I'll give everybody an advance peek. I've talked some in fragmented ways about this topic, but I'm going to go really far afield. I am going to talk about what I know with my particular brand of psychological theorizing and my interest in various kinds of psychological principles. What I know about why the earth is in, why the human beings who populate the earth are in such disarray at this point, why there's so much pain, why there's so much dissonance, why there's so much hatred, why there's so lack of coming together to make the world any better, and what the hell is this time we're going through? And it doesn't seem to be limited to the United States. Many countries are going through the same divisiveness we're experiencing. If anything, after the last election, I feel like maybe we've turned that corner, and maybe it's going to start to mute now. But it has been a terrible time, and I have no reason to believe the terrible time is really going to start to end. But I want to talk about what has created and sustains the terrible time, and what, if anything, anybody can do about it. And that's going to be my strange next lecture next week. And now I will turn the floor over to my dear colleague.
Arthur, I have several comments.
I'm ready.
Great comments. One, the stuffed animals for your client, they were her audience, they were her supporters, they were her assistants, and they
Yes,
were her friends.
yes,
And she had many friends. What she didn't have on the outside, she had in the office. These
absolutely.
animals were her great friends, and she utilized them brilliantly. With her child clients, and just fantastic. It's what a wonderful child therapist you're describing. I do a little bit of child therapy still, and it reminded me. This week I had an 8-year-old boy who was off the charts in terms of intelligence, and he
Yeah,
came in with a number of different fears, but engaging with him was such a delight. It was like the highlight of my day, and
yes,
it's so much. It's so exciting and so much fun, and so I could see how she's just a kind of a brilliant therapist. When you were talking about her ending therapy with that particular boy, I was thinking about kind of like, well, what about Zoom? Could she resume a Zoom session, a Zoom therapy with this boy who's
oh, she would
moving?
love doing it. They don't want to pay for it anymore. They were her
Oh,
services. They're wealthy people, but they're stingy. Her services were being paid by the state of California.
okay. Yeah.
Oh, she
The-
would jump at being able to stay in his life.
yeah.
She'd like to stay in his life until he reaches adulthood and she sees what the destination is.
Mm. The other thing,
Oh,
and
ha. I'm going to suggest that she isn't that busy that she call the family and say, tell them that she'll see him for free.
why not via
That didn't
Zoom?
occur to me until just now.
Yeah,
Sure.
of course. Why
She
not?
will pay them money to see you.
Maybe.
Yeah, yeah. They might jump at that.
Mhm.
The other thing I also wanted to comment on in terms of your suggestions regarding kind of like dealing with the cousin and confronting the cousin.
Yeah.
She's got a sister who is going to become a lawyer
Yes,
and who's going to fight for women's rights, you know, in her country. I don't know if in some ways it would be her sister, but what if she hired a like-minded lawyer in the country who was a crusader for women's rights and could confront this man and this practice in in that country and fight for her, you know, in that country. And so in some ways she wouldn't have to kind of like be so vulnerable,
oh,
but
that's
in some
wonderful.
ways would have a great crusader for her in terms of kind of like not only wronging that terrible right or terrible wrong, you know, in terms of her life, but also, you know, helping all the children and the women who experience similar types of atrocities.
Thank you. I wrote in big letters on this scrap of paper that I'll keep here by my computer. Hire an advocate.
Yeah, but a powerful, powerful
Yeah.
attorney.
That's willing to buck that system.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
That's gonna be,
we'll get death threats.
yeah, it's not the same rule of law as and maybe you might assume in other places.
I want to back up to your first comment about the stuffed animals. Her husband is so loving. He says many times he finds her an adorable child, and that's not a negative for him. It's really very delightful for him. And as a matter of fact, every night when they go to bed, he says to her, "Which of your friends do you want to bring to bed with us tonight?" And she always brings 3 or 4 different stuffed animals
Mhm,
to be on the bed with them and when they sleep at night.
mhm, mhm,
Such a nice man.
mhm.
Yeah.
Aaron, anything like this evening?
Well, I was thinking, I was just curious. I'm very excited to hear how you're gonna fix the world next week.
I don't know if I can fix it. I think I can do a good diagnosis of what's wrong with it.
Okay, well, no, that's a
Why
start.
it's-
That's a good start.
Why we're stuck in it.
Mm-hmm. All right.
Blah.
Yeah.
All right, guys, thank you
All
very
right.
much.
Okay,
I'll be
all
back
right,
with you next Friday.
all
Sounds
right.
good. Good to see
We'll
you
see
guys.
you. Bye.